Hello, welcome to Political Dharma with Alan Zundell. And today I'm going to be discussing different ways of voting to elect people with my guest from the Equal Vote Coalition, Arend Castelein. Hello, Arend.
Hey Alan, thank you so much for having me.
And Equal Vote Coalition is what?
Yeah, so the Equal Vote Coalition is a nonpartisan nonprofit focused on reforming the voting method itself. And we endorse a number of voting methods, including star voting, approval voting, and some forms of ranked choice voting, although we don't support the what's commonly known as ranked choice voting, the instant runoff voting system.
Okay. And why would anyone want to change the way we vote?
Yeah. So I have a few slides jumping into this, if I don't mind sharing. This is what the current voting system looks like, where you just get to pick one, and a lot of people feel like they can't safely support their favorite. They feel like they have to strategically vote for a lesser evil. And that's why anybody gets into voting method reform to solve this problem. And one of the big kind of knock-on effects of this is something called vote splitting. So the reason you feel that way is because when you have two candidates running, that's totally fine. That's a fair fight. The one with the most votes wins. But once you get more candidates on your side, they split the vote. It breaks, and then you can often find yourself passing the win off to the other side. So that's why anybody ever gets into this space. And to solve this, we need a voting method that gives more choices. So there's been a number of
Let's go back to that last one for just a second.
yeah,
I want to point out Darth Vader on the right is the bad guy.
yeah,
Luke Skywalker on the left is a good guy. So what you're saying is there's more support for the good guy if you only have two candidates. But once you get a lot of other good guys or good women, good people involved, and good creatures, then each of them takes a share of that vote of people who like the good people, and the bad guy can win. That's what you're saying. Not talking about any particular candidate who's been elected recently, but that's the general idea.
exactly. And it's
Whoever
kind
your
of
idea of the bad guy might be.
right, right. And it's counterintuitive because you'd think having more people on your side would make you stronger, but with the current voting system, that's not how it works. Having more people on your side divides the vote and makes it harder for you to win.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's this core problem that we're trying to solve, and it leads to lots of like knock-on effects, like the spoiler effect, where a minor candidate can impact who the winner is. Or another one that is also can very clearly be seen here is it really discourages having a lot of candidates or having competitive races, and we just end up with two candidates because we're afraid to have anything more than that, and voters don't get a real choice.
And just two parties, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's also
Which
this part like what leads to the two-party system.
right now there's a minority who supports each of those parties, and a lot of folks who regard themselves as independents because they're kind of sick of the whole system and want to see something different.
Hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. So let's talk a bit about what something different might look like. The activist community has if you talk to activists, then they tend to fall into one of these three camps in terms of the change they would like to see, like how we can the change where we can allow voters to support multiple candidates. There's this yes no style of ballot where you get to mark as many people as you like, yes or no. There's this scoring style of ballot where you score every candidate from, in this example, it's a 0 to 5 range. Or there's ranking style ballots where you say first, second, third choice. So at equal vote, there's a lot of variations of these methods, but at equal vote, our favorite is something called star voting, which uses the scoring ballot style. Yeah, we've actually gone through all of the we've gone through all the various voting methods and kind of sorted them against these criteria. We believe voting should be simple, honest, expressive, accurate, and equal. And what we find is that ranked choice voting, or I should say, choose one voting, our current system is simple, but it doesn't really do well in all those other categories. Whereas ranked choice voting, which is the most popular alternative, or the alternative with the most push in infrastructure at the moment, that one's expressive, but it doesn't do well in a lot of the other ones. Whereas the reason we support star voting, approval voting, ranked robin is because they all land in the center really nicely, and star voting does the best of all. So
So ranked robin is a ranked choice method, but it's not exactly the one people are hearing about.
exactly, it uses the same ballot, but it uses a much better means of counting, which is why how it kind of managed to land in this sweet spot better.
Okay, so we saw how the ballots look different, which is what the voter really wants to know. How do I fill out my ballot? But then there's a difference too in the way those ballots are actually counted.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
please proceed if you had more here.
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit more about star voting.
Okay,
So
this is the one
star,
that you're favoring.
yeah, this is the one that my favorite, and it's our champion proposal at the Equal Vote Coalition, even though there's multiple that we support.
Okay,
Um, so with star voting, you would score every candidate on a 0 to 5 scale. And then after you vote once, your ballot is counted twice. So first it's counted in a scoring round where all the votes are added up, and then from that we determine the two finalists, and then your vote goes to whichever of the two finalists you prefer. So in this example, this voter between the Blake and Carmen finalists, their vote went to Carmen because they scored them higher. So Carmen wasn't this voter's favorite, but their full vote was still able to make a difference between the two frontrunners
okay, so
because of this
was
automatic
not
runoff.
their favorite. Not neither of the two were their favorite. There would have been
Exactly.
someone they gave a five, or more than one people they may have given a five. But since whoever they gave a five to was not one of the two finalists who got the highest scores overall from all the voters, still in that runoff, the fact that they preferred one of the runners up to the other makes a difference.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep. Because there's a runoff, their vote still gets to make a difference despite their favorite not making it to the runoff.
I see. And honestly, I already knew this. People are probably aware of that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's the gist I wanted to share about star voting.
So you said this whole problem with the choose only one voting has a lot of effects, can limit the number of candidates you have to choose from, limit the range of candidates to have a chance of actually winning, uh, can be detrimental if you have more than one candidate with similar views, all that stuff. And that's called the spoiler problem, that last one, which people have heard about and may not know how it works. So all of that, is this really pressing at the moment? Are people really, as you talk to people about these changes, is the general public unhappy enough with the voting system they're using that they are very receptive to this? Like, what is the temperature of the public as these things are presented to them?
Yeah, I'd say whenever you show the public more express one of these better ballot styles, it's very quick to be on board. They are frustrated with only having two choices, and they'd having a better ballot and having more choices on the ballot, that's a very refreshing idea to them. And the nice thing is that it's beneficial regardless of what the voter's background is. So for third parties, it's great because there's going to be more third party candidates on the ballot. If you have a method like star voting, that those third parties can have a better chance, or at least we can better record their full support. But it's also good if you're somebody who prefers like the Democrats or Republicans, because like in this last election with Harris and Trump, I'm sure there are a lot of Democrats who would have liked to have seen more options, maybe a Gavin Newsom on the ballot or likewise with the Republicans, maybe they would have liked to have seen it Nikki Haley in addition to Trump. So yeah, a better ballot can just give more options for everybody, and it's there's benefits for everybody.
So that's partially going to depend on if they can have choices among Democrats, really means that you have to have a different primary system because in some places there's always only going to be one candidate per party, but still they have more choices because those alternative parties like Libertarian Party, Green Party, and the rest have a more realistic chance to show their real level of support. And people don't have to worry if I vote for, say, Jill Stein, I'm going to end up electing Donald Trump if you're on the left end. Same thing with the libertarians, which the Republicans are always worried about them getting votes that may have gone to the Republicans. So it works either way, depending on if you have a lot of candidates from the same party or if there's only one candidate from each party.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
It works either way, regardless.
So before we go further, can I ask you, first of all, Equal Vote Coalition that has these different recommendations for different voting methods. What's your role in this? Are you just an advocate for these, or what do you do?
So I'm the production lead at Equal Vote, and that means that I help with a lot of our technical projects. And yeah, and one of the main ones there is bettervoting.com. So that's an app that makes it easy to vote with these better voting methods, like star voting, approval voting, um, some forms of ranked choice voting. Actually, we have all forms of ranked choice voting, but we recommend you could use bettervoting.com as like a good comparison point with like see what would happen with ranked choice voting versus star voting, for example.
So bettervoting.com, people can go to that website and they can try out different voting methods and use it for, can they invite other people to vote in an election? Like if I had a little club and I wanted to elect the chairperson, I could use it.
Yeah, exactly. So if yeah, so if you wanted to make like a quick like sample poll or use it for your club, you could go to bettervoting.com and you go ahead and create that. And we have the full spectrum of polls there. So people can use that for like a small like example election, like voting for your favorite fruit, voting for dinner. But people have also used it for their book clubs or for political organizations have also used it for their internal elections before and have sent emails out to thousands of people. So we support the full spectrum of elections on that app. And yeah, we're really excited for that to kind of build awareness so that it can eventually be used for public elections.
Okay, so you've gone through different ways of voting, what the ballots look like, and you've said some that your organization thinks are better than others, depending on these five criteria. And now we have talked about a way people can actually try things out and get familiar with them. All right, what would be a reason why somebody would want to get involved in this? Well, we kind of talked about the reasons people do get involved in this. Let's start with this instead. Is this movement ongoing? Is it like are a lot of people joining in? Because I know ranked choice voting was on the ballot in this last election, and it seemed like it did not do well. What's going on with the whole movement? Is it showing signs of progress? Is it going backwards? What's happening?
So we've been concerned about ranked choice voting for a long time, but yeah, as you said, it hasn't been doing well recently. So let's kind of like roll that back a little bit. And when we, one of the big recent events that really started to show the cracks in ranked choice voting was an election in Alaska in 2022. That was their first adoption of Alaska. First adoption of ranked choice voting in Alaska. And the first election was so interesting and controversial, I actually made a whole website detailing how that went. So that website is rcvchangedalaska.com. And on that website, we see that in their first election, they thought it was safe to run more candidates. So they ran two Republicans and one Democrat in the selection. We had one Republican was Sarah Palin. She was like kind of the further right Republican. And then we had Nick Begich, who was the moderate Republican. And then we had Peltola as the Democrat. And what we found in this election was Begich was the consensus option among the population. 70% of people in this election um, ranked Begich in their top two. But because of the way that ranked choice voting was counted, he was eliminated in the first round of ranked choice voting, and then the win went to Peltola, the Democrat. And that triggered all of this partisan backlash, or, it triggered partisan responses from both sides. Democrats wanted to lock in further to ranked choice voting. And for Republicans, um, seeing that there were two Republicans running and they split the vote, they they also had felt like something was fishy there. They there was like good faith and bad faith reasons to for the backlash, but ultimately Republicans banned as a result of this election, Republicans banned ranked choice voting in 15 states, and then in the previous election, November 2024, ranked choice voting was on the ballot for like maybe 5 or 6 states, and almost all of them failed. Yeah, that movement's kind of recovering from that right now.
If people have heard of any of these at all, they probably heard of ranked choice voting because they've been promoting that. There's a big organization, Fair Vote, been promoting this for decades, and they were actually making strides in getting it instituted in counties and cities, and then in the state of Maine for higher level offices. But this particular Alaska election showed a flaw with it. This is 2022. So the very next election cycle, or at least 4 years later, no, 2 years later, 2022 to 2024, this last year, there was a lot of ranked choice voting on the ballot, and they were all failed. They all failed. You said no, there. I think there was one that was close, and they were recounting, but they all failed.
I think Washington D.C. I think that
Right,
one
passed
passed. I
for
think that
that
might have been the
too.
only one.
Okay. And now it's become a partisan issue. Democrats seem to like it because it elected a Democrat in a largely Republican or independent state. And Republicans feel cheated because they had, the majority of people wanted a Republican, but they got a Democrat. So that's made it partisan. And of course, when you get partisan, everything falls apart. And the whole point of this stuff is to make things, at least not the whole point, but part of it is less partisan because if you only have two parties, they're always at each other's throats. But if you got more choices, perhaps things would be a little tamped down that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we're like a strictly nonpartisan organization, because we think that as soon as you end up aligning in the partisan camp and make this a partisan issue, it really hurts the movement. And yeah, in Alaska, people thought that ranked choice voting was going to give them more choices and make the dynamics less partisan. But then after seeing that it wasn't safe to run multiple Republicans, in the very next election cycle, we were back down to two. It was Peltola versus Begich, and then in that head-to-head, Begich ended up winning. So it feels like a real shame to go through all this effort to adopt a new voting method, only to have it only revert back to these two candidate like partisan dynamics that we saw under the previous method.
Okay, so that was a setback for the movement as a whole because people associated voting change with partisanship. And you're saying that really what's behind the movement is not people trying to gain an advantage for a particular party. They really want to have fair elections, and whether people are going to trust that or not, that's what you're saying you're trying to do, and other folks presumably are trying to do. Where do you think it needs to go from here to get over that hump?
One of the kind of the biggest issues with getting better voting methods passed is kind of one of the biggest issues is that ranked choice voting is taking up a lot of the energy, but that's starting to change. Like in the past, I used to describe star versus ranked choice as sort of like a David versus Goliath effort. But I've started to get pushback from people now saying, "Oh, after this 2024 election, um, ranked choice voting is no longer the kind of the Goliath it used to be, and people are starting to think about where do we want to shift energy to next." So, um, we believe star and approval would be great directions to put that energy to. Um, because they actually do solve the fundamental problems that ranked choice voting set out to solve. However, I just went to a conference, um, kind of seeing the which democracy reforms are on the table right now, and people have lots of different ideas. So um, one of the big ones that's popping up is this idea of deliberative democracy. So that's where you similar to a jury process, you take a randomized group of people and you educate them on a topic and then have them decide. That's one idea, and other people are focused on money and politics. But we're staying on voting method reform because we believe that's the smallest change that can have the biggest impact.
So there are a lot of alternatives, and now that ranked choice voting doesn't seem to be taking up all the air in the room, activists are trying to sort out where they want to go, and that's not good for the movement as a whole. Do any of them have current efforts ongoing that seem to be having some success or shows that they have better potential for getting public attention and winning somewhere to show they can work?
All of these reform efforts can work in tandem. Like we can have efforts on money and politics, we can have efforts on the citizens assembly deliberative process work. Um, I think that citizen assembly in particular is still like in the early stages. That's just kind of like an early exciting thing. But all of those overlap with the missions of voting methods. Um, so yeah, just expand on that a little bit more. So with voting methods, if with our current system where you can only really have two candidates, that benefits people, the candidates with more money. And it really influences what the conversation is, and it influences how, how like voters only having two choices on the ballot that influences how much nuance they can have. Whereas changing the voting method, opening that field up, reduces the influence of money in politics. It encourages voters to think more nuanced. And yeah, so that's why we're focused on the voting method. And in terms of where it's being implemented, our biggest three chapters are Oregon, California, and Ohio. And we're working hard to get it in use as many places as possible. And it's been used for a number of internal elections. So in Oregon, it was used for the Democratic Party of Oregon and the Independent Party of Oregon. We've had chapters in California. We've had a chapter of the Democratic Socialists interested in using the system, and libertarian parties have also been interested in using it. But yeah, so that we have loads of momentum for star voting. But yeah, getting to that first campaign, getting it get passed in the first place, going from 0 to 1 is the hardest part.
In your opinion, maybe Equal Vote hasn't taken a position on this, probably not, but in your opinion, when the public is saying we need a big change, like they keep going for a change candidate, if the Republicans are in power, they say, let's try the Democrats because we don't like what the Republicans are doing, and vice versa. When a Democrat's in office, then they say, well, this is not it either. So they're looking for something entirely different, which led to a lot of unusual candidacies like Bernie Sanders getting a lot of support in the primaries or Donald Trump
Mhm.
winning two elections. Would you say this voting reform is really the kind of big change that would satisfy that appetite for the politics working differently than it does?
It's not forefront of people's minds, but I think this is a systemic change that can create the culture that we want. Because right now with the two parties, um, it's almost like we're toggling back and forth. Like one party's in power, then the other party is like purely focused on being the opposition party and not necessarily providing a solution, but it's about like how can we frame our party as just a little better than the other one. Whereas if you have a better voting method, you can have all these extra options on the table. You could have an election with, um, you know, Kamala, Trump, but also Bernie and all the other options. And I think when you have all those options on the table and voters get a chance to pick between them, I think that's where we'll be able to get a candidate that truly represents the consensus opinion. And when you have candidates represent a consensus opinion, we're not going to have this polarizing flip-flopping effect where people are always looking for change from the status quo, never getting the full answer. We'll be able to converge towards that candidate that, represents the people.
So if it converges towards a more consensus candidate rather than someone that is of a more partisan orientation, does that mean we're going to end up necessarily with centrists everywhere and people who are kind of wishy-washy about taking a position on issues? Is that where this might take it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because that's like a really important clarification. When we talk about a consensus candidate, that's not the same as like a centrist, like moderate candidate because you know, if you look at the population and where they lie on something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're like smack between Democrats and Republicans. And they could be like completely outside of that spectrum. So if you have election with a wishy-washy candidate, I don't think they'd be getting like loads of like 5 stars. They'd be getting like twos and threes. In order to um, inspire support and win under star voting, you need to get a lot of those 5 stars. But it's still valuable to reach across the board because it's just as valuable to go from a 4 star to a 5 star as bringing somebody on the fringe from a 0 star to a 1 star. So yeah, we still maintain a emphasis on building your support and building your base as big as possible. But star voting encourages candidates to reach really far as well.
So I can imagine a candidate from out, and I don't want to say left field because that makes it sound like ideological, but a candidate who is not really on the radar of most people has a better grasp of what the public is looking for, and they could somehow emerge from this building consensus because their ideas are appealing to people across the spectrum. So it could be a very different dynamic that way. We might see things that we hadn't expected, people with ideas we hadn't expected come out of this and actually solve problems, dare I say, solve some of the issues this country is facing, other than just the political system, like the economic issues and environmental issues and all of that. Yeah, that's going to be
Yeah.
a yes either way, right? All right,
Yeah.
let's talk about then
Yeah.
pushback on
Mhm.
this, unless you wanted to say something about that.
No, I'm excited to have more options, and I think I'd be right now. All the third parties probably feel like they're like really shut out of the movement, but if with more options, we get to have all of them be part of the conversation, and we get to actually identify like what is the true consensus opinion, what's the truth in a way that we can't have that conversation right now.
I know the reason I got involved in this in the first place was that I wasn't happy with the messages I was hearing from the Democrats or the Republicans, and looking for another candidate was kind of futile because if you get involved in a alternative party, they have little chance of winning or even making an impact on the public discussion. And independents that might sound good, that might crop up like Bernie Sanders, they end up resorting to the two-party nominations because, otherwise they're not really going to be viable. Anyway, so yeah, that's why I got into it. I want to hear more voices and have more choices for myself. And that's why it's exciting to me and hopefully to other people. So, what are the obstacles that you see? There's pushback on this? Are there types of people that say, I don't want this? You talked about Republicans not liking ranked choice voting because of that Alaska election. What are the kind of problems do people have with this? What other hesitations are you hearing on the part of people who are exposed to this?
First off, I'll say that the general public uh, are not as clued into this. So if we're going to somebody in public and pitching this, a lot of times just seeing the expressive ballot is enough to excite them and enough to um, kind of get buy-in for them on this vision. In terms of the in the advocacy space, there's in the anti-RCV movement, we want them to start seeing to rather than focus on we want them to respond to the problems of RCV by figuring out how can we upgrade RCV as opposed to like how do we repeal it. So getting people to switch that mindset of like validate that the problems the anti-RCV movement has, the problem that you have with RCV is valid, And star voting addresses those. So um, communicating that to the anti-RC space is important. And then for jurisdictions, um, helping them understand the spectrum of solutions is also like um, important. And for when you're trying to get adopted somewhere, one of the concern, let me step back. So when you're trying to figure out the best option for a jurisdiction, um, star voting is a really good option if they want what's perfect and ideal, and if they just want to get the best results and really go with a really good solution. But some places say, "Oh, I don't want to go for a big change too fast," and in those scenarios, approval is also a really good option because it solves that fundamental spoiler effect.
I'm hearing you say that some jurisdictions sound like they're already looking for a change in the way they vote. Are you talking about like the ordinary voters in that area are trying to make this happen, or are you actually finding receptivity among elected officials? Because my first guess would be someone who won office using the old method would not be too eager to change to a different method and have to adapt their whole way of approaching campaigning for election. So it's what's happening with elected officials? Is there anybody on board with this, or are they uniformly poised to stick a dagger in it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of that where some election officials um, will be hesitant to switch voting methods because of that's the one that got them in power. But there's lots of other like rationales they might have. Like we've seen jurisdictions that just really want to eliminate runoff elections and save money there, which star voting can accommodate that. There's other elections where they're just really tired of having like polarized they're tired of having elections where the winner has like 20 or 30% of the vote, and they just want something simple to address that. And that's what happened in Fargo, North Dakota. They had a lot of those like really split divisive elections, and they found that approval um yeah was the option that solved it for them. And that was the simplest option. So a lot of times some politicians are like just strictly for the system that got them elected. But a lot of times politicians are actually like interested in having like a better election dynamic and having a voting method that will give them a stronger mandate from the people.
So if somebody did want to get involved in this, how would they dip their toe into it? What's the way to get involved?
Yeah, so for our organization, you can go to starvoting.org/join. And then from there, you can be as involved as you want to be. So signing up, sovereign.org/join will get you on our email list so you can be in the loop on the latest that's happening in each of our chapters and all the work we're doing. But you can also go further. If you, after filling out that form, you'll be directed to an orientation. I run orientations every 2 weeks. And the orientations are structured as with the first half just being a star voting 101, just going over the basics, giving you a chance to um, ask any questions. And then after that, there's an optional volunteer onboarding section where if you want to be more involved, I'll that part of the meeting is there to help you get plugged in, get you plugged into a chapter, get you plugged into one of our committees. We need folks of all skill levels. We have work for people who want to do software, people who want to do canvassing, people who are interested in social media work. Yeah, we have work all across the spectrum, and we're happy to have help regardless of if it's like once a month or if you want to be more involved in that.
Okay, so people can get as deeply involved as they want to. What if they don't want to volunteer at all? They just want to give some money to help support. Is that, I assume there's a way to do that simply and easily.
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to starvoting.org/donate to donate to our campaigns fund. And we also have a kind of a more education focused fund at Equal Vote, which is equal.vote/donate. And there are different nonprofit statuses. So the donations to Equal Vote can be tax deductible, whereas donations to starvoting.org will help with our campaigns, but they are not tax deductible.
You mentioned that you have strong chapters for the Equal Vote organization in Oregon, California. I just moved from Oregon to California, and in Ohio. I
Mhm.
was surprised to hear Ohio. Um, is there like active measures to try to get star voting or other voting measures on the ballot that are now taking place somewhere?
Yeah, so we're taking a little bit of a step back from campaigns at the moment, trying to build out our infrastructure. And yeah, the once we build that out, we'll be ready to hit the ground running with future campaigns. So there's a lot of work around that. I'm actually started trying to start a Los Angeles chapter at the moment, and we want to do more canvassing just to, get the word out more in Los Angeles and get more people engaged in the process. Because before you start a campaign, it's recommended to be doing field work like well in advance to really build that momentum and build that community support. So that's kind of the phase we're at in Los Angeles. But I know, yeah, every group is at different phases, and we have some city councils we've been talking to, which is another way you can go about implementing it is kind of to go via city council rather than by a public ballot initiative. So yeah, lots of options and lots of things being built at the moment.
Was there anything you wanted to say that we didn't cover that occurs to you now to get in before we end this interview?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, check out startvoting.org/join to get involved. Check out the bettervoting.com app to try it out for yourself. We had a poll we ran last year called bettervoting.com/prez24. And that's a really fun poll where you can try out choose one, approval, ranked choice voting, and star all at the same time. And you can see how the results differ between them. And you'll see that those alternative voting methods really do a much better job of giving the full picture of which candidates are supported. Yeah,
I remember what I wanted to ask about, which was people associate the West Coast with trying out different things, whatever, either it's a good idea or it's just kooky. People associate California, maybe Oregon with that, Washington State. What's going on in Ohio, the Midwest? Those very uh, very sober, sensible people in the Midwest. Are they really on board with trying to make something happen? Why is it picking up steam there?
we have a really great leader, Duncan, who has really done the groundwork to start a chapter there. And yeah, people are interested. I am not on the ground there, so I don't have as much of the details, but there's a number of progressive organizations interested, Forward Party is an organization we've collaborated with and across multiple chapters. And it's we know it's not a total like written off area because ranked choice voting also has a movement there. So like all yeah, I'd say any state there's an interest in reform that just needs to be tapped into.
It sounds like what you're saying is what it takes is for a person to really take some initiative to get something going, and the receptivity among the public and among people who want to see some kind of change and are willing to work for it is there. Is that the idea? Is that what you
Yeah.
found to be true?
Yeah, what I found to be true is that a lot of people are interested. It doesn't take a lot of like I've had conversations with MAGA people as well, where once I make the pitch to them and explain to them like how what star voting can deliver and how to improve ranked choice voting, they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I like this." Um, so yeah, making the pitch isn't the bottleneck, or finding people interested isn't necessarily the bottleneck. It's getting enough volunteers engaged enough to like be leaders in this movement and to yeah build that organization. That's where the bottleneck can be sometimes. So
All right. So if
yeah, that's why we need people.
any big names are out there who are going to run for office, pick this up as a campaign issue and make it something that the public is aware of, get people excited about it, and that can really help boost this as well. I'm not sure if anybody like that is watching, but in case you run across this, do that. I think I've asked all the questions I want to ask, and I think we're running short on time now. Anything else occurs to you?
No, that's everything. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed having this conversation.
I did too. Thanks for being with us, and maybe we'll be talking to you again sometime if something develops that's exciting and you want people to know about it. All right, that's Arend Castelein with the Equal Vote Coalition working on voting method reform, and his organization is really backing star voting as the one that seems to have the best outcomes, but also looking at other systems, comparing them, educating people. So look into that if you're interested. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.